There is a kind of person who becomes strangely steady the moment the ground disappears. You may have seen it. Someone gets a phone call that changes everything, and while the people around them begin to unravel, this person goes quiet in a particular way. Not cold, not disconnected, just still. Their voice drops half a register. Their movements slow down. They start making practical decisions, asking the right questions, holding space for others who are falling apart at the seams. And then later, sometimes weeks later, they finally feel the weight of what happened. Sometimes they feel nothing for a long time, and that frightens them more than the event itself. Or maybe that person is you. Maybe you have noticed that you do your best thinking when something breaks, that you feel, strangely, more capable during a crisis than during an ordinary Tuesday. That chaos carries a kind of clarity you can't always find in calm. And you might have wondered what that means, whether it's healthy, whether something in you is broken, or whether something was built into you a long time ago. That wondering is worth sitting with, because there is real psychology behind it, and understanding it changes the way you see yourself. The thing being named here is a genuine and recognized human pattern. Some people, under conditions of acute stress or sudden upheaval, experience a functional calm rather than a functional panic. Their thinking sharpens, their body settles. They become more present, not less. And this isn't the absence of feeling. It is a particular nervous system response that has everything to do with history, temperament, and the way the body learned to protect itself. To understand it, you have to understand a little about what stress actually does inside us. When something goes wrong, the body's threat detection system activates. Most people are familiar with the fight or flight response. The heart rate climbs, the breathing shallows, attention narrows to the immediate. This is the body preparing to act. But there is another response that doesn't get talked about as often. Researchers sometimes call it the tend-and-befriend response, and it moves in a different direction. Rather than escalating arousal, some nervous systems under stress shift toward focus, connection, and deliberate action. The anxiety is still there underneath, but the outward presentation is composure. The person becomes functional in a way that surprises even themselves. What determines which direction a person goes is partly biology, partly personality, and partly the environment they grew up in. Here is where it gets specific and important. For some people, particularly those who grew up in unpredictable or high-tension households, the experience of chaos was ordinary, not unusual, not dramatic, just Tuesday. A child in that kind of environment learns very early to read a room with extraordinary precision. They develop a finely calibrated internal radar for tension, for shifts in atmosphere, for what might be coming next. And over time, the nervous system stops treating unpredictability as a threat signal and starts treating it as a familiar environment, one they know how to navigate. Calm, paradoxically, can feel more unsettling than chaos for people with that history, because calm is the unfamiliar state. Psychologists who study resilience and stress responses have noticed this pattern across a range of people. It isn't a disorder, it isn't damage exactly, it is an adaptation. The nervous system learned what it needed to learn to function in the conditions it was given. The problem is not the skill. The skill is real and often remarkable. The complication is that the skill can become a default setting that runs even when it is not needed, and even when the person underneath it is quietly struggling. Which brings us to what this actually feels like from the inside. If you are one of these people, you probably recognize this. The emergency arrives and something clicks into place. You feel almost relief in a strange way, a sense of purpose. The fog of everyday uncertainty lifts, and you know exactly what to do. You make the calls, manage the logistics, hold the people around you who are coming apart. You are sharp, present, almost unnaturally efficient, and people around you notice. They lean into your steadiness without realizing they are doing it. You become the anchor. But then later, when the storm passes, something odd happens. Other people begin to recover. They process, they grieve, they let themselves feel the full weight of what happened. And you feel a kind of delayed flatness, or sometimes a low-grade anxiety that seems to arrive out of nowhere now that there is nothing urgent to manage. The body, having held so much at bay, does not always know what to do with stillness once the crisis is gone. Some people in this pattern describe it as feeling more real during difficulty than during ease. Ordinary life can seem slightly muted by comparison. There is nothing wrong with an ordinary Tuesday except that it offers no clear task, no obvious role, nothing to solve. And for a nervous system trained in urgency, that absence can feel strangely hollow. There are also people who experience this for a different reason entirely, and it is worth naming. Some people feel calm during upheaval because they have become genuinely skilled at emotional regulation through years of practice, therapy, or deliberate self-work. They are calm not because they are disconnected from feeling, but because they have learned to stay with feeling without being overwhelmed by it. This is a different version of the same outward presentation. The stillness looks similar, but comes from a different place. One comes from suppression or dissociation, the other from integration. Knowing which one is closer to your own experience is useful, honest information. There is also a third group worth mentioning. Some people find calm in crisis because the crisis removes ambiguity. Ordinary life asks hard, open-ended questions. Who am I? What do I want? Am I doing enough? Is this the right path? A crisis cuts through all of that with one clear, immediate question. What needs to happen right now? For people who find ambiguity difficult, that clarity is genuinely calming. The problem is defined. The role is obvious. The moment has sharp edges, and sharp edges feel easier to hold than fog. All of this raises a question worth keeping in mind for a few minutes longer. If you recognize yourself in this, what do you do with it? Not in a fixing sense, more in a seeing clearly sense. The first thing is simply to name what is yours. If your calm in crisis came from early adaptation, from a childhood that made unpredictability feel like home, then there is likely a version of you underneath the competence that did not always feel safe. That part does not need crisis management. It needs ordinary, patient attention. The kind of attention that says you do not need to be useful right now to deserve to be here. The second thing is to watch for the delay. People who hold it together in the moment often find that feeling arrives later in unexpected forms. Irritability 3 weeks after the event. Fatigue that seems disproportionate to what is currently happening. Sudden sadness during a quiet morning when nothing is particularly wrong. These are not random. They are the emotional content that was held in suspension, arriving when the system finally believes it is safe enough to let them through. Recognizing this for what it is, rather than treating it as malfunction, can make those moments a lot gentler. The third is a small, practical thing. Try, during ordinary time, to give yourself permission to simply notice what you feel without having a reason to feel it. Not during a crisis when you are already doing well, but on the Tuesday that asks nothing of you. Sit with that quiet. See what comes up. not because stillness should be forced, but because the part of you that only wakes up during an emergency deserves a little more of your time than that. None of this is a suggestion to stop being the steady person in the room. That quality in you is real and it matters to people, but it belongs to you as much as it belongs to them. As always, everything here is offered as general insight into human tendencies, and if any of it touches something deeper, speaking with a qualified professional is always worth considering. The people who go calm when everything falls apart are not unmoved by the world. They are often the most moved by it, carrying a great deal very quietly for a very long time. Understanding that about yourself or about someone you love changes the conversation. It makes the steadiness feel less like a wall and more like a story. If this episode sat with you, there is a new one here every day. If it resonated, subscribing means you will not miss what comes next.